taking off the MC banner because I'm the next keynote speaker. But actually, this has actually been my first year as a CEO, so it's been really great to listen to that challenge from someone who's been in this kind of role for more than a decade, but also leading new innovation again and again. So thank you, Jamie, so much for that presentation. So I'll try and be quick, but good morning, everyone. Again, I'd just like to acknowledge country and acknowledge Ngunnawal Ngambri people as the traditional owners of the land that we're joining you all from. And in particular, I'd also like to acknowledge Donna Murray, the IHA CEO, who's been a personal mentor of mine for many years now, and everything that I've learned from Donna and her leadership, I've tried to implement into my own organisation and ways of working. There have been some images in there of my family who have gone, but they're shared with permission. So who am I? I'm not just a pretty face, actually, that you get up as MCs with sashes, no. I'm a Turrumbal and South Sea Islander woman from Rockhampton, Central Queensland. And so on that right-hand side, you'll see that I'm from Tanna Island, descended from the blackbird trade, or what we call the sugar slave trade, where people from the islands in the South Pacific were brought to Australia to work as labourers in, sugarcane plantations. And on the left-hand side, I'm from the Turrumbal Nation, and I'm from the Coomera clan. And in the middle, you'll see my grandmother, Lorna McQuire. Her maiden name is Man. And so this here is a picture of Turrumbal Nunti. It's covered under native title, and the elders in my community fought really hard to gain this recognition, actually. Turrumbal people submitted their native title claim in 1997, and it was granted in 2016, making it one of the longest running applications in Queensland. So this here picture on the left-hand side is from Nurum, which is a mountain on our country, and you'll see that the Fitzroy River, which we call Tunaba, comes through our country and meets the ocean. And we have some of the largest, most ecologically rich wetlands in Queensland. And we also have about 36,000 square kilometres of sea country, which is recognised under a Tumra agreement because we're kind of at the tail end of the Great Barrier Reef. So we also recognise our role in caring for sea country too. I wanted to share and describe Turrumbal Nunti because in doing so, I share with you a bit about who I am, because country is our classroom, and it's this specific place that my people have cared for thousands of years, passing down learning from generation to generation. And even through the process of colonisation, we have managed to maintain and revitalise our languages and cultural practices. And our knowledge and learning systems are intrinsically linked to the land, seas, waterways and skies. This is what our foundation is. And so my personal passion in life is actually education. And you might be thinking, sis, why are you even here? This is allied health. And to that I say, yeah, you're right. But someone had to fill the TBC. But in reality, there is a lot that the education system can learn from health and the infrastructure that the Indigenous health ecosystem has built over time, which is evident in the community-controlled sector, incredible peak bodies, leading research institutions and so much more. But there's also practice that can be shared as we advocate for both health and education professionals to be both anti-racist and culturally responsive. And if I can put it kind of blunt, the future of the allied health workforce does benefit from a strong and equitable education system that supports all kids, especially our kids. But access to a quality education doesn't just look like chairs and tables, teachers and whiteboards, school bells and tuck shops. I had access to all those things at school, but what made school inaccessible was the story it told me about myself. When I went to school, I was taught that Captain Cook discovered Australia and that we were founded as a nation of convicts, and this whitewashing made me feel like I was erased. And it's this insidious racism that made me feel like education was more about gaining a license to operate in a white world than a key to my own liberation and freedom. And for generations, the relationship between Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families and Western systems of education has been facilitated through a colony whose nation building relies on disconnecting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people from not only our land, but also from the knowledge systems that bind our identity, kinship systems, cultures, and our very being to it. And these sandy foundations of education impact all young people, especially our people. Australia has one of the most socially segregated education systems in the OECD. But what does this actually mean? What does inequity actually look like? Well, it actually looks like your postcode, and that being the biggest indicator about whether you're going to succeed in school or not. It looks like young people completing more than 12 years of schooling with nothing, no certificate to show for it. It looks like the overall slow decline of Australia's PISA scores in reading, science and math. It looks like school exclusions and suspensions, where Indigenous young people are more likely to be suspended or expelled, and where we've heard instances of this happening to our kids as early as their first year of schooling. And of course the list goes on, and I'm sure every person in this room can speak to a different aspect or pressure point within this system. But put simply, the system is not working for all young people. And when it doesn't work for all young people, it's breaking a social contract made with them that the provision of education will prepare them for their future. And Australia is facing an education equity emergency fueled by this society unwilling to reconcile with the reality of our colonial foundations. So what exactly do we do? Well, since the current education system grew from a nation-building effort to disappear my people, it makes sense that the solution lies in reimagining education from a position of sovereignty. And yes, this is a complex and multifaceted issue, but what I can put forward is the call to action led by the National Indigenous Youth Education Coalition, an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander youth-centred organisation committed to backing youth and student agency to assert our rights to education. So NIAC was formed through an education advocacy workshop I facilitated for young people way back in 2015, and it was supported through my role as a member of the UN Secretary General's Global Education First Initiative Youth Advocacy Group. But basically, through that space that was created, we came together, yarned, shared our experiences of education. We developed a call to action that laid out our own set of education demands. But what ultimately drove the formation of NIAC was that we were able to find our heartbeat. And in coming together, we found a sense of direction, founded a collective of young mob, including Samara Hand, Renee Phillips, Nicola Barker, Caitlin Kelly and myself, who volunteered for over 5 years to grow, share and test this thinking with more young mob and the broader Indigenous education community. And we bring diverse perspectives both from different nations and lived experiences, but also from different skill sets. Samara has a law background. Mine is in vocational training and more international education development. Renee and Caitlin are educators, and Nicola is a social worker. And this is important because it recognises that education intersects across all systems, including health systems. And even more so, I need to recognise that the support that IHA gave NIAC in the very beginning that helped us get off the ground. They auspiced us, allowed us to use their meeting rooms for our team meetings, and also Donna came in and yarned to our team about nation building, which has heavily influenced our work. So our work in education first was supported by the health sector. In 1993, the Coolangatta Statement on Indigenous Peoples' Rights in Education states, and this is the precursor to the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, that the education struggles of Indigenous people are fundamentally and unequivocally concerned with the right of Indigenous people to be Indigenous, and that youth and the young have a special place and responsibility in this struggle to nurture and protect Indigenous cultures, because it is to them that truth and wisdom is bequeathed. And this speaks to the role that young people have in transforming education systems. And while in many ways inspirational, this is a lot of pressure for young mob To put that in context, the majority of our population is under the age of 35. This means that we have a large proportion of our population who are in school or are university aged. They are responsible for learning and passing down the longest continuing culture in the world while going through an education system that actively seeks to dismiss and deny their identity. All the while, the world is rapidly changing, and the futures that young mob are going to inherit are increasingly complex. And I should really say that those futures are getting closer and closer to us. We're already seeing the drastic impacts of climate change is having on our environments. So if sea levels continue to rise, if bushfires and cyclones continue to be more frequent and more intense, what does that mean for our landscapes as they continue to change? What will mean for the stories that those landscapes hold? Before the pandemic, NIAC delivered a series of workshops around the continent called The Education of Our Design. And through this workshop, we asked young people to design what learning and knowledge systems would look like from that position of power. We reimagined everything from the purpose of education through to what we wanted to learn, how we'd want to construct learning spaces. Everything was up for discussion. And what we learnt was that young mob want to learn and grow through the transformative power of education, but we don't want to trade away what's intrinsic to us, what connects us to who we are and where we're from. So this reimagining is not actually calling for anything new. It's signaled a desire to reclaim what our people have passed on for thousands of years, learning that cares for the land, waterways, seas and skies, and all life shared with it, a system of learning that has been designed for us. And so these are some of the pictures that we come through when we do our workshops. And so in doing this work, Young Mob envisioned education for the purpose of freedom. And while the complex futures that young people will no doubt inherit are very stressful, what we have also inherited is resilience. We are the benefactors of more work, more activism, more revitalisation than any generation before us since invasion. And so we recognise that there's so much work being constantly done by so many mob, but this is part of our goals that we offer as a contribution to achieving and transforming the education system. I won't go through all of them, but I believe that Australia won't achieve any real progress towards equity unless space is intentionally carved out for the First Nations people to lead systems of learning. And we believe that a really important lever for change is the learner recognition system. So the ATAR stands for the Australian Tertiary Admissions Rank, which gives students a ranking relative to their peers when they leave school. And we're the only one of the very only countries that actually does this, that ranks our kids. It's kind of weird. But it is the dominant form of recognition. And that says that this score lets me know that you've succeeded at school. But a key issue with this current system is that there's a misalignment between what we measure as educational success and what our learning goals are. So if I were to ask you, well, what is the goal for Indigenous education? You might say, increase attendance rates, or improving grade 12 graduation rates, and those goals that you might find in the Closing the Gap strategy. And all very well important. However, during our education of our own design workshops, Young Mob highlighted that they felt that our metrics for success were inadequate. And actually, these are just tools. They're not actually our learning goals. That actually young people believe that their success in learning is more than attendance, more than retention. And I love this quote from one of our workshop delegates who said, "I wish we placed greater emphasis on creating good, strong people as opposed to just good students." So this current system is narrow and only provides a shallow representation of what young people can know and can do. And there are organisations already innovating in this space, and one of them is Learning Creates Australia, which I also co-chair, and then I partnered with NIAC. How are you going to make an agreement with yourself around the common goal? But see, I'm not giving. A better recognition system But really, we believe that a better recognition system would open the opportunity to recognise and value more of what young people can do. And so it really supports their future journeys. So Learning Creates launched at the height of the pandemic, all in lockdown, a national social lab called The Learner's Journey. And so we brought together from all across the country small diverse teams from across really industry, health, education, to co-design prototypes to answer this question of how would we go about broadening what we value in young people when they leave school. And critical to this work was making sure that we had a completely self-determined First Nations-led team to unpack this question from an Indigenous perspective, which is what we did. And so we began this work by listening to the learning journeys of First Nations young people, as well as Indigenous educators and those in the education system. We also tried to think about different positions in relation to country and how that influenced young mobs' learner journeys. For example, not necessarily thinking of remoteness as just distance, but that when you're a learner, you can be remote from your country, and that can also impact how you learn and the access you have to your own Indigenous rights to education. So we tried to think back to that connection and grounding to land and place and how that might influence learners and the types of learning they have access to. For example, one young fellow we spoke with, he grew up on his country and he was very strong in his identity and would often be asked to attend community events during school time, to do dances as part of Welcome to Countries, or whatever reason. But whenever he would do that, the school would mark him as absent. So that was a huge part of him that was not valued or recognised by the school. But in connecting with his community, his kinship systems, his culture, his language, he was learning. In comparison, students are able to do a Duke of Edinburgh Award, go out camping for a night and have that recognised on their school certificate. So in listening to these stories and thinking through this, we wanted to make sure that we weren't trying to credentialise our culture in a way. We're not trying to create a Cert 2 in being Aboriginal. But what came through was the importance of well-being, because we had health professionals in our team who reminded us of this fact, and that well-being should be valued and recognised as a metric of success just as much as academia. So back in 2021 at the IATSA Summit, IHA patron, June Oscar, reminded delegates that the native title was actually meant to be accompanied by a social justice package that includes the right to education. But the creation and implementation of this package was never honoured by the Australian government. And so through this process, we are working with the Darumbal Native Title Body to design Indigenous-led charters with which to renegotiate and renew relationships with schools that operate on Darumbal country. And so the charter is still in design mode. Actually, I was just in Rocky last week, but we're being guided by elders about the visions and protocols for learning on Darumbal country. And again, I know that native title is not perfect, but this was a cultural match for our community because it recognised the governance of our native title body in caring and managing lands and seas. So this is kind of what our charter looks like. And so, as you can see from this, we use the mango tree as a symbol for our sovereignty and connection to land. And because mangrove trees really hold our shorelines and protect us from erosion. And so we saw the deep roots as Darumbal sovereignty, and that the water that comes in and out, that represents young people and schools and the systems that operate on our country. And the people within those systems might change, but our sovereignty never goes away. And that we want our charter to be underpinned by Indigenous perspectives of well-being. And so Indigenous Allied Health Australia have been a part of this journey, with members from the academy teams joining our First Nations prototyping team. So shout out to Gabe, Jacinta and Cassandra. We've also had IHA members be a part of the team. So shout out to Amelia McKenzie, a deadly dietetics student. Actually, she was a dietetics student first, and then I introduced her to IHA. So just saying. But it was actually Amelia who really identified with the need to focus on well-being. So really it shows that health and education intersection is really so important, and it's important that we work across systems and sectors as well. Now I have a short video to play for you. It is a rough cut, so there are some little edits to be made still, but I think it shows the bulk of the work we're doing with the
learning.
Charter.
There are so many skills and capabilities that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students bring to the classroom, bring to schools, that are not currently recognised in ways that they should be.
The whole being of young people. It's so important to recognise all of those things that they're doing in their Indigenous world, because they're in that Indigenous world all of their lives.
Learning is not just an individual pursuit to make sure that you get a step up on another person or that you get a job. Learning is about understanding who you are, where you're from, and your responsibility right now to those future generations.
People aren't coming to school feeling safe, secure, not just like emotionally, physically, like everything, spiritually as well. They're not going to learn.
Always making sure that our young people and our learners are central, and not just about bringing curriculum in and just delivering it, but as a holistic approach, and really getting to know the young people in the room.
If we don't recognise and we don't get to that point where we can actually start to seriously think about what are the elements in their Indigenous worlds that is learning and that should be recognised, then we'll only ever think about how they perform in the non-Indigenous world.
And they could be personal skills, leadership skills, communication skills, but more broadly, cultural skills, caring for country skills.
Being acknowledged for the work that they're already doing in the community at such young ages, that's going to help them with anything that they want to do in the future.
We have a strong focus on thinking about learner well-being. So many young mob going through school feel like they don't belong, or feel like they can't be fully themselves, or that they have to sacrifice part of themselves in order to succeed in education.
I went to boarding school in Cairns, far away from home.
Not being able to be my full self, it was very unmotivating and exhausting to explain. Changing every little thing about yourself so it would be suitable for this environment and community.
We want our kids to have that sort of thoughts in their mind. I can do this and I will do it.
At the fundamental, most basic level, the purpose of the Charter is about resetting relationships between the schools that operate on Aboriginal land, and for Aboriginal people to have a say and have a renewed relationship based on equal standing with these schools.
With developing a charter that is based on self-determination, that is based on culture, identity and our relationships, is going to make sure that our young people can engage in their own education and training pathways.
We'd see a big difference in our kids that are coming through high school, and they'd have a whole totally different outlook on life, on who they are.
Having the Charter throughout my high school experience really would have uplifted me as a person, knowing that teachers see you. They really recognise, your strengths as an Aboriginal person. Sometimes you feel a bit held back because of the colour of your skin.
It's creating our own safe space to be who we are and enable that confidence, that ability to use our identity and our culture in a positive way, where we're feeling safe around designing our education and how we then interact with that education and training on our own terms.
The Charter allows that connection with the traditional custodians, with the elders, with the people that you want in schools. They are our greatest teachers, our elders, with country. And if you can have them on board in a school context, you have so much rich, deep history and knowledge to use as a teacher.
This charter, I believe, provides a real opportunity to create a new way of working in Indigenous education in Australia.
Thank you. I'll just, so yeah, this is a little bit of the model, but as it was said in the video, it is about establishing a renewed relationship of trust between community and schools so that we can negotiate. Hey, start singing along to the music then, eh? You know, so that we can negotiate and articulate on our terms whether activities need to be assessed in order to be valued. And we can look at ways that we can actually extend trust so that community members can be the ones to warrant learning that happens that may align with, you know, disciplinary knowledge or domain knowledge like science, maths, English, HASS, that kind of thing. But that is taught through Indigenous community-based programs. It's about allowing a mechanism for schools to value the time that our young people spend doing activities that are good for their well-being, that connect them to the country, connect them to culture, connect them to who they are. And so, yeah. In closing, I just always want to send this message to Indigenous young people, you know, to those young people in the room who are told to change how they talk, who gets marked absent for that time spent on country, who was silenced during that history class but is the expert in Aboriginal studies, who sits and listens and does the cuppa tea run for your nan. You know, you are the embodiment of what it means to have the longest continuing culture in the world. And the pathway you choose to take in life should be supported by a strong, equitable education system that respects your well-being and your value as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students. So thank you, that's all I had to say. Yeah. So this is our vision, yeah, for NIAC. Yeah, this is our vision. It puts the learner at the centre, and that's the kind of liberating education system that we're working for.